The morning air at the graduation stadium carried a crispness that hinted at both excitement and anticipation. Rows upon rows of folding chairs were filled with families, friends, and well-wishers, all gathered to celebrate the young men and women who had just completed some of the most grueling training in the Navy. The sun had begun its slow climb over the horizon, spilling golden light across the parade ground and glinting off polished brass buttons, medals, and the edges of ceremonial rifles. The murmurs of the crowd blended with the occasional trumpet fanfare, creating a symphony of anticipation that filled every corner of the vast open space. Among the sea of proud parents and eager spectators sat a woman who could have easily been mistaken for any other. She wore a simple blouse, unremarkable in its style, and a pair of dark slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, revealing the slight lines that marked her face, not with age so much as with the quiet strength of someone who had endured more than her share of trials. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, watching the rows of cadets stand tall and disciplined on the parade ground. To anyone glancing her way, she was just another parent, quietly observing her child's achievement. There was no uniform to signal her presence, no rank or decoration to mark her past. No one would have thought twice about her, not in a crowd this large, and yet her presence carried a weight far heavier than the simple seat she occupied. It was in the calm, unassuming way she held herself, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the quiet alertness in her eyes that betrayed the truth beneath the surface. She had been a part of something few could even comprehend, a chapter of service that demanded excellence, courage, and a willingness to confront danger most people could not imagine. But here, at this graduation ceremony, that past was invisible. Or so it seemed. Her son stood at attention among his fellow graduates, his uniform pristine, his posture reflecting the discipline instilled in him over countless hours of training. Her gaze lingered on him, pride mingled with a mother's subtle worry. She remembered the first time he had walked through the doors of boot camp, wide-eyed and uncertain, clutching a duffel bag that seemed far too heavy for his small frame. She had prayed for his safety, for his strength, for him to emerge not just intact but whole. And now, watching him stand shoulder to shoulder with his classmates, she felt a swell of emotion that threatened to spill over. The crowd buzzed with activity around her. Cameras clicked, children laughed, and friends waved to the graduates. Yet she remained focused, almost meditative, on the line of young men and women in front of her. She adjusted her sleeve slightly, unaware that the simple motion would set off a chain of events she could not have anticipated. Beneath the fabric, etched into her skin, was a mark of service and sacrifice, a tattoo, discreet and personal, that told a story of courage few had the privilege of witnessing firsthand. From across the stadium, a figure emerged, commanding attention with every measured step. A SEAL Admiral, his uniform adorned with medals, ribbons, and insignia of the highest rank, walked purposefully down the aisle. The crowd instinctively made way, and heads turned as whispers of recognition spread. He was a man who had seen the most dangerous operations the Navy had to offer, a figure whose presence alone demanded respect. Yet, as he moved past the rows of spectators, something unexpected happened. He stopped mid-step, his eyes locked on the woman sitting quietly in the crowd, and in that instant the atmosphere shifted. The world seemed to narrow, the sounds of the crowd fading into a distant hum. There was a recognition in his gaze, a weight of understanding that spoke of shared experience and unspoken history. The tattoo beneath her sleeve, a symbol he knew well, was no ordinary mark. It carried a legacy, a story, and a level of excellence that few could ever achieve. At that moment, everything changed. The ordinary morning, filled with smiles and ceremonial pomp, was punctuated by an invisible line connecting two people who had walked paths of courage and sacrifice. The crowd remained blissfully unaware of the significance of the moment, but for those two individuals, the world had shifted. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement, respect, and a recognition of a legacy that had remained hidden for far too long. And as she sat there, quiet and composed, she had no idea that the simple act of attending her son's graduation would place her in the center of attention, not for what she was wearing or how she looked, but for the story her body bore, a story that would leave even the highest ranking officer in the Navy frozen in awe. The Admiral's gaze lingered longer than anyone could have expected. His footsteps halted as if time itself had stilled around him. People nearby shifted in their seats, glancing curiously at the sudden pause, but the woman remained unaware of the significance. She sat quietly, eyes fixed on her son as he adjusted his posture in the sunlight, unaware that the simple brush of her sleeve had drawn the attention of one of the most decorated figures in the Navy. For a moment the world seemed to contract around her. The low hum of the crowd, the rustling of programs, and the distant chatter of families faded into the background. All that existed in that space were two people, one a woman whose extraordinary past had long been hidden, and the other a man whose life had been spent recognizing legends even when they walked unnoticed. The tattoo, subtle and understated, was enough to ignite recognition in a way words never could. The woman adjusted her position slightly, brushing her sleeve back without thought. It revealed just enough of the ink for the Admiral to know with certainty what he was seeing. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing in a mixture of disbelief, awe, and respect. That symbol was not just a mark of identity. It was a story of missions that few had survived, of operations conducted in secrecy, of precision, courage, and resilience that transcended ordinary comprehension. It was a mark reserved for the best of the best, a silent badge of a warrior whose deeds were known only to those who had shared the trials of the battlefield. Meanwhile, the crowd remained oblivious. Families clapped at the speeches, photographers adjusted their lenses, and children fidgeted with programs. To them, it was just another proud parent, another graduation, another routine moment of pride. No one could have guessed that within that simple civilian blouse there lay a legacy that commanded the attention of the Navy's elite. The woman's mind, however, was elsewhere. She had long learned the art of compartmentalization, of walking among civilians while carrying the weight of missions that would never be spoken of in polite company. She thought of her son, standing in formation with his peers, and a wave of emotion swept over her. Years of quiet dedication, of sacrifice and training, had brought her son to this moment, and she felt both pride and a subtle, protective worry. She had known the dangers of the world, the cost of service, and yet here he was, unscathed, ready to step into his own future. The Admiral, still frozen in his stride, began to move again, but not before nodding subtly, almost imperceptibly to himself. Recognition was a silent language, one spoken in a glance, a pause, or a fleeting gesture. To anyone else, the moment would have seemed insignificant, trivial even, but to those who understood, it was monumental. Here was a woman whose life had been forged in the crucible of elite operations, and yet she had chosen this day, of all days, to blend into the crowd like anyone else. Her presence was quiet, almost invisible, but the symbol on her arm told a story louder than words ever could. He began to approach, his movements deliberate and measured. Every step carried authority, every motion weighted with experience. Around him, the crowd seemed to part instinctively, though no one could articulate why. There was a shift in the atmosphere, subtle but palpable. People leaned slightly forward in their seats, sensing something extraordinary but unable to name it. A hush fell over the immediate area, a tension that prickled at the edges of perception. Something was about to unfold, and even those not yet aware of the story could feel its gravity. The woman, still unaware of the eyes upon her, shifted her weight slightly. Sunlight caught the edge of the tattoo, illuminating it in a way that made it appear almost alive, vibrant with the history it carried. She tugged her sleeve down instinctively, and yet the moment had been enough. Recognition had already been made, and once that connection had been established, it could not be undone. Her heart beat steadily, though she was unaware that it had sparked awe in one of the Navy's highest ranking officers. It was a quiet strength she carried, a composure earned through years of training, missions, and secrecy. She was accustomed to blending into crowds, to remaining unseen even as her actions spoke volumes in the shadows of classified operations. And now, even in the ordinary setting of a graduation ceremony, that legacy had revealed itself. As the Admiral drew closer, the crowd began to notice a shift in energy. People instinctively turned to look, sensing importance, sensing history being made. But none could have imagined the story hidden beneath the simple folds of a sleeve. None could have known that the woman before them was not just a parent, not just a figure in the crowd, but a legend quietly extraordinary, whose life had been defined by courage, precision, and the unspoken code of warriors. And in that suspended moment, the first threads of recognition, respect, and awe had woven themselves into the fabric of the ceremony, ready to unravel a story that no one in that stadium would ever forget. The parade ground gleamed under the morning sun, every polished shoe reflecting light, as if the entire formation had been coated in a thin layer of gold. The cadets stood at perfect attention, chins up, shoulders squared, rifles resting neatly at their sides. Each one was the embodiment of discipline, precision, and rigorous training, the hallmarks of the Navy's finest. Among them stood her son, a young man who carried himself with quiet pride, the culmination of years of sweat, sacrifice, and relentless effort. From her seat in the crowd, she watched him like a hawk, her eyes tracing every movement, every subtle shift in posture. There was a protective instinct in her gaze, born of years of experience she had never shared with anyone. She knew what it meant to prepare for danger, to face the unknown with nothing but training and courage to guide you. And she had passed that same resilience down to him, not through words but through example, through the unspoken lessons of persistence, integrity, and the silent strength of endurance. The formation moved with mechanical precision, the rhythm of their drills echoing like a heartbeat across the stadium. Her son's movements were flawless, each command executed with exacting attention. She felt a swell of pride, coupled with an almost imperceptible worry. The world could be unforgiving, and she had seen its harshest edges, but she also knew he was ready to step into a legacy that was larger than himself, one built on discipline, courage, and honor. The crowd's energy was infectious. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, and parents leaned forward, eager to catch a glimpse of their children as the ceremony unfolded. Yet despite the noise and commotion, she remained focused, almost meditative, her thoughts quiet but precise. She was trained to observe, to notice details that others overlooked, and even here, in a place meant for celebration, her senses were alert. Every glance, every movement across the field was catalogued and understood in the context of years of experience she carried like a second skin. Then, across the stadium, the figure of the SEAL Admiral emerged again, his presence commanding immediate attention. His decorated uniform gleamed in the sunlight, the medals and ribbons testament to a career spent in high-stakes operations that few could comprehend. The crowd instinctively parted, whispers of recognition spreading as he walked with steady, deliberate strides. He was a figure of authority, one whose experience and achievements were instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with the military. But it was not the crowd he saw. His eyes locked onto something far more significant, a subtle detail in the audience, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. The woman, sitting quietly, became the focal point without even realizing it. Her sleeve had shifted again as she adjusted her position, and the tattoo etched into her skin caught the Admiral's trained eye. It was not a flashy or ostentatious mark. There were no bright colors or large designs. But its meaning was unmistakable to someone who had walked the same path, a symbol of elite training, of missions carried out in secrecy, of courage and precision under conditions that would break ordinary men and women. In that instant, recognition passed silently between them, a knowledge that transcended conversation, a shared understanding born of experience and respect. The crowd, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, continued to cheer for the graduates. Children waved small flags, family members whispered to one another, and cameras captured fleeting smiles and proud tears. But the woman's attention remained fixed on her son. She watched as he responded to commands with impeccable precision, his movements synchronized with the cadets around him. There was a rhythm to the formation, a sense of unity and purpose, and she felt a deep connection to that order. Her heart swelled with pride, not just for his accomplishments, but for the journey that had brought him here. She remembered the long nights of preparation, the moments of doubt, the small victories that had accumulated over time to form the man he was becoming. And yet, beneath the pride, there was also a quiet acknowledgement of what lay ahead. The Navy was a demanding world, one that required resilience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to duty. She had lived it, and now she watched him step into it with confidence she had helped cultivate. The Admiral took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Recognition and respect were etched into his expression, though the world around them continued in ignorance. In that moment, she was no longer just a mother at a graduation. She was a symbol of legacy, courage, and excellence. And her son, standing tall among his peers, represented the continuation of that legacy, a living testament to the quiet strength and discipline she had instilled. As the formation executed its next maneuver, perfectly in sync, the woman's heart beat in time with theirs. She remained seated, composed on the surface, but a storm of emotions played behind her eyes. Pride, love, anticipation, and the faint thrill of being seen in a way she had long thought impossible. For a fleeting moment, the ordinary world of graduation faded, replaced by the extraordinary weight of history, recognition, and the quiet but undeniable power of legacy.